Theory of Temporal T greater than zero space by Francis T. S. U. Narrated by Connie Etheridge. How many theoretical physicists knew mathematical physics is not a physically realizable physics? Theory of Temporal T greater than zero space. Mathematics is not science, but science uses mathematical language to speak the truth. It is reasonable to develop a temporal t greater than zero space theory like theory of set in mathematics, for which let me begin with a temporal t greater than zero space as depicted in Figure 1, in which it is filled with substances that coexist with time. This new concept of time-space theory is appropriated for application to our physically realizable sciences. This temporal t greater than zero space, i.e., our universe, is closer to the truth instead of using Einstein's 4D space-time continuum that violates all the laws of nature. Nevertheless, theory of set was developed strictly from a pure mathematics standpoint, but mathematics is not a science, for which temporal t greater than zero space theory is a useful time-space for realizable mathematical science. It is because mathematical physics is not a realizable science, since mathematics does not need to obey the laws of nature. Figure 1 shows a temporal t greater than zero bounded subspace. Theory of set. Theory of set was developed from an abstract empty space paradigm, as all our mathematics did since mathematics was created. But set theory is a pure mathematics that fundamental physicists should not have used. For example, empty set is not a physically realizable set as depicted in Figure 2, in which we see that an empty set, for example, equivalently to an empty subspace, is an acceptable set within a universal set. But it is not physically realizable set for science, since it is not a subset within a temporal t greater than zero set. Theory of set is pure mathematics, which does not need to obey the laws of nature. For example, the famous Russell's paradox, as I quote, "It does not exist a set of all sets," in which we see that mathematics does not allow paradox, yet science does not. Figure 2 shows an empty set can be situated within a universal set, since mathematics does not need to obey laws of nature. Where did all our sciences develop? Science uses a mathematical speaking language and needs to obey laws of nature which cannot be fictitious, as mathematics is. For example, as depicted in Figure 3, believe it or not, origin of our mathematical science was developed from an empty space substrate, which is precisely why our analytical sciences are fictitious as mathematics. Strictly speaking, our mathematical physics is not physically realizable. In fact, all mathematically oriented science are mathematics, but not science. Science does not allow paradox to exist, but mathematics does. For example, the paradox of Schrödinger's cat has been proven false since science does not allow paradox. from which we see that empty set paradigm is not a physically realizable platform that can be used in science. Yet mathematical physicists have used it since the dawn of our analytical science. Figure 3 shows an empty space, which has no substance in it and no boundary. It is a mathematical subspace. Theory of a physically realizable space. Since our time-space is a three-dimensional space coexisting with time, where time is a forwarded variable, for example, temporal, t greater than 0, conventional set theory cannot be used to emulate our temporal, t greater than 0 universe. Everything within our universe changes with time. This slide shows more evidence that conventional mathematics, which includes set theory, cannot be simply employed in science. Although science uses a mathematical descriptive language as depicted in Figure 4, we see that an empty set is equivalent to an empty subspace. This cannot exist within a temporal t greater than 0 space known as temporal t greater than 0 exclusive principle. Figure 4 shows a physically realizable bounded space in which everything within the space changes with time. Footnote 1, FTSU, Time, the Enigma of Space, Asian Journal of Physics, Volume 26, Number 3, pages 143 to 158, 2017. From temporal t greater than 0 space to creation. One of the best astrophysics observatories must be the thousands of years accumulated observation by us. Any created universe by mathematical-oriented physicists is very unlikely to be truth, since mathematics is not science, in which one of the worst models must be the four-dimension zero-summed space-time continuum of Einstein. Unfortunately, space scientists have used it for over a century. Surprisingly, they did not even know that this model violates all the known laws of nature. Nevertheless, one may ask, even though Einstein's relativity theory is false, why is this energy equation correct? Ironically, E equals mc squared was derived from his false relativity theory. The answer is that every mathematical science has multiple solutions, whether they're correct or not. Yet it is the physical realizability constraint, for example, law of temporal t greater than 0, that limits the numbers of possible solutions to one correct answer. Only one physical reality can emerge from a physical realizable mathematics at a given time. Because of the limited knowledge of our universe, one of the best models of it must be the creation from a mass to energy transformation, for example, E equal 1/2 mc squared. This creation was started within a space that has time, for example, temporal t greater than 0. Otherwise, it would be more difficult to justify how a mass can be annihilated by itself without time. In view of an accepted kinetic energy equation, E equals 1/2 mv squared, we see that its total energy from a given mass is equivalent to E equals 1/2 mc squared, where m was annihilated means totally changed into EM wave at speed of light. Notice that this equation is virtually identical to Einstein's energy equation, except his energy equation was derived from his relativity theory, which is not a physically realizable theory. Footnote 2. This is also one of the evidences that shows every mathematical problem has multiple solutions. Nevertheless, a physically realizable solution has one solution. The supposed creation is the limitation of our present knowledge of creation. But this temporal t greater than 0 universe model obeys all the laws of nature that I have known. For example, we have seen Einstein's 4D spacetime has already created scores of fantasy principles that have been polluting our modern science sector. Why then does the scientific community continue to believe this 4D spacetime continuum is truthful? Footnote 2, FTSU, Introduction to Physically Realizable Physics, ISBN number 9798877098312, Chapter 13, 2024. Why every mathematical problem has multiple solutions. Every physically realizable science must result in one solution, even though every mathematically physics has multiple solutions. Since mathematical physics does not need to obey laws of nature, this is precisely why mathematical physics is not science. Besides, physically realizable science does not allow paradox, while mathematics does. But science used a mathematical language speaking for the truth, yet the truth must be physically realizable. For examples, paradox of Schrödinger's half-life cat, time dilation of Einstein's relativity, quantum electrodynamic of Feynman, and many others are not physically realizable sciences. The apparent reason is that our universe takes everything within her at expanding her boundary at speed of light, for which we see that why her entropy increases, for example, enclosed energy degrades, with time as depicted in Figure 5 in the next slide. In other words, everything within our universe changes with time. For example, its energy degrades as our universe expands at speed of light, in which we see that our universe is an energy conservation dynamic subspace. Mathematical physics is not a physically realizable science, since it simultaneously produces multiple solutions. But physically realizable mathematical science can only have one solution. Figure 5 shows our universe exists at time t equal t, and it enlarges as a t equal t2, yet the total energy within our universe is conserved. Disprove Einstein's relativity. Since Einstein's relativity theory is strictly mathematical, for which we anticipate that it has multiple solutions. For example, a moving clock is traveling from San Diego to San Francisco at a constant speed of v, as depicted in Figure 6. According to Einstein's relativity, time clicks slower for a moving clock than the stationary one. From a mathematical standpoint, it has a great number of solutions for the moving clock to reach San Francisco, travels at various velocities of v. Since relativity theory is mathematics, it has a huge number of solutions. One of the solutions is that instantly, for example, at the expense of time, the moving clock will reach San Francisco if the moving clock is moving at the speed of light. Figure 6 shows a moving clock travels at a velocity of v from San Diego to San Francisco. However, since physically realizable science has only one solution, if the same scenario is submerged within a temporal t greater than 0 space platform, as depicted in Figure 7, it has only one solution, in which we have found that the moving clock ticks at the same rate as the stationary clock, even if the speed of the moving clock reaches the speed of light. This proves once again that Einstein's theory of relativity is false, since we cannot change the time of our universe. Figure 7 shows the same scenario, but submerges within a temporal t greater than 0 space, from which we see that both clocks tick at the same rate. Einstein relativity was mathematically created. Since Einstein's relativity theory was derived on an empty space paradigm like all our fundamental laws of physics, his relativity theory does not need to obey the laws of nature, for example, temporal t greater than 0. In other words, Einstein's relativity theory, for example, special and general theory, is mathematically created. Nevertheless, his relativity theory is a mathematical problem, which is anticipated to have several solutions, regardless whether they are physically realizable or not. This is precisely why his energy equation turns out to be correct, in addition to a bunch of other fictitious and false solutions. For example, rest and move masses and others. They were derived from his relativity theory. Yet without the law of temporal t greater than 0, mass has no way to annihilate. Since relativity theory is mathematics, it has a number of solutions, but not all of them are correct solutions. For example, one of his energy E equals mc squared is correct, and all the others are not. In which I have shown a correct solution can also be produced from incorrect principle, such as his relativity theory, since mathematical science is still a virtual mathematics. However, if a constraint of physically realizable mathematical physics is a realizable physics. In other words, as I have shown, if a hypothesis developed on a temporal t greater than 0 platform, then its mathematical solution will guarantee to be physically realizable within our time space. Why mathematical physics is not science. Since mathematics was man-made, it does not need to obey the laws of nature, such as temporal t greater than 0. Although science uses a mathematical language, it must obey laws of nature. Laws of nature are supposed to discover, but not to create. For example, Einstein's spacetime, and as well as Schrödinger's quantum theory were mathematically created. They are mathematical sciences, which are not physically realizable, which is exactly why all our mathematical physics are not physically realizable. One simple example is that mathematical physics allow for paradoxes, for example, time traveling, superposition, and others, while physically realizable physics does not. Since physically realizable physics has one physical reality, this is precisely why theory of temporal t greater than 0 physics is crucial. Otherwise, we would continually be buried by mathematically oriented sciences. If we do not do anything about it, the damage will be more severe. And it is not fair to our students, children, grandchildren, our young physicists, and to our conscience. A universe of all universes does not exist. Within the theory of temporal t greater than 0 space, we see that a universe of all universes does not exist, since physically realizable universe has only one universe which cannot be repeated. This theorem is like Bertrand Russell's paradox in set theory, but the implication is rather different. Since set theory is mathematics, it follows the mathematical logic. It has nothing to do with time, energy, entropy, and others. But within our temporal t greater than 0 space, everything changes with time. In other words, things within our universe must obey all the known laws of nature. For example, law of temporal t greater than 0, law of entropy, and others, in which we see that a universe to include our universe cannot exist, since this is the only universe that we have and cannot be repeated. It is a mistake to advocate paralleled or multiple universes. A physically realizable paradigm. Science uses a mathematical language speaking for the truth, for example, physically realizable. But mathematics does not need to follow the laws of nature, for example, law of temporal time greater than 0, for which mathematical science needs a realizable paradigm to guarantee that her solution will be physically realizable. Mathematical set theory, for example, theory of set or space, is not a suitable theory that can be applied to our temporal t greater than 0 space, for example, our universe. By which I have shown a temporal t greater than 0 space theory which follows the laws of nature. If mathematically oriented physicists use this theory as applied to her mathematical physics, its solution would be guaranteed to have only one temporal t greater than 0 solution that obeys the laws of nature. Since within our temporal t greater than 0 universe, it has only one physical reality which cannot be repeated. A physically realizable paradigm. Science uses a mathematical language speaking for the truth, for example, physically realizable. But mathematics does not need to follow the laws of nature, for example, law of temporal time greater than 0, for which mathematical science needs a realizable paradigm to guarantee that her solution will be physically realizable. Mathematical set theory, for example, theory of set or space, is not a suitable theory that can be applied to our temporal t greater than 0 space, for example, our universe. By which I have shown a temporal t greater than 0 space theory which follows the laws of nature. If mathematically oriented physicists use this theory as applied to his/her mathematical physics, its solution would be guaranteed to have only one temporal t greater than 0 solution that obeys the laws of nature. Since within our temporal t greater than 0 universe, it has only one physical reality which cannot be repeated. Temporal t greater than 0 space theory is a useful time-space of set for realizable mathematical science. In conclusion, I have shown that a temporal t greater than 0 space theory, like theory of set of mathematics, which can be developed. Nevertheless, theory of set was developed strictly from pure mathematics standpoint, but mathematics is not science, for which it is because mathematical physics is not a realizable science. Since mathematics does not need to obey laws of nature, since every mathematical science has a few solutions, regardless whether they're correct or not, but physically realizable mathematical science is limited to one, for which we see that physically realizable mathematics is a correct mathematical physics to explore, by which it offers only one physically realizable solution. Although temporal t greater than 0 theory is like theory of set, I have shown that within our time-space it does not exist a universe of all universes, since our universe has only one temporal t greater than 0 universe that cannot be repeated.